Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Cilinix Crypto. Hope you're all doing great, and welcome to this new video right here on the markets. Your middle of the day market update. Look, there is a lot going on in terms of news right now. Obviously, Trump and Xi Jinping are talking somewhere this week. There's a lot of tariffs news coming out at this point of time. I will not be able to cover everything. All right, so we'll talk about the fundamentals around the markets. We'll talk about the fundamentals in the financial markets specifically. I will talk about some news specifically as well in this video, but there's a lot, right? And you should have some news sites under your bookmarks to stay updated with that. I will try to keep you updated on that as well. If you go to my Telegram, I actually have a Cilinix news channel in which I try to share news as soon as I get it. Consider joining that if you're interested in that. There's a link. If you go to my X page right here at Cilinix Crypto, you can find all the links to my to my channels. So if you want to be updated on the news in a simple way, consider joining that. But for now, let's get right into the video because there is a lot we need to talk about, and we will also talk about this pullback warning, right, which is in the thumbnail. I don't want to scare you all with that because ultimately I think on the higher time frames, Bitcoin is actually quite stable, but still within that stability, we can have a bigger pullback. And at this point of time, I'm leaning towards expecting a pullback, but more on that later. First of all, when we talk about the fundamentals, we had some good news with the Circle IPO, 25 times oversubscribed. That's good news, right? Because that's good news for stablecoins. In general, I would say that Circle's valuation also will have some sort of an effect on crypto indirectly, but that's good news, and that's causing some stablecoin related projects like Athena and Maker to hold up relatively well, because in the last couple of minutes or in the last 10 minutes or so, the markets have pulled back, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's good news. But then earlier today, what we saw is, first of all, Trump saying something about, it's gone. But Trump saying something about Jerome Powell being late again. Historically, that has caused, that tension, that friction has caused some bearish pressure in the markets. And that's also briefly what we saw over the course of today. It was very brief though, all right? But that was because of economic data, right? Today we got the ADP employment change that was much lower than expected. I don't think that matters too much. Because if you take a look at the JOLTS job openings yesterday, those were much higher than expected, right? So it's a little bit of yin and yang, and then we just got PMI data. First of all, we got higher than expected data, now lower than expected data. So again, that kind of balances each other out, right? I can talk very great this afternoon. But no, I mean, one of the things that I do not really like about the markets, and we already know that Wednesday is never the best day for Bitcoin. Like normally it's a little bit of a neutral day, but what you see right now is that the S&P 500 has been relatively neutral. There's no major bearish momentum, but what we do see is quite a lot of bearish momentum in the crypto markets, right? Bitcoin is pulling back right here. If you take a look at altcoins in general, they are first of all very correlated to Bitcoin, and first of all there's a relatively high Bitcoin dominance. So that is something I do not like. Now, the volume is not the highest at this point of time. Like if you compare the volume to last week Thursday, it's nothing, but it's still something to be cautious of, right? And then when we talk about Bitcoin specifically here, what we talked about this morning as well is that we yesterday failed to break above the 4-hour downtrend and the 7-day rolling VWAP. We have had a very weak reaction at the 30-day rolling VWAP here. So that means that it seems more likely at this point of time we're going to pull back into support. Now, there the higher time frame comes in, right? And we have amazing support at 103.5, we have support at 102.5, and we have support at around 100,000. Do I think on the higher time frames that's going to hold? Yes, certainly. All right, but that's still means, especially with the Bitcoin dominance being at the levels it's at right now, that still means short term we can see quite a lot of pain for altcoins, and that's also ultimately what you are seeing right here, where quite a lot of altcoins are just falling down together with Bitcoin. So just be aware of that. All right, I think on the higher time frames Bitcoin will actually stay strong, but on the lower time frames that doesn't mean that we cannot pull back quite hard. And you all know that if Bitcoin dominance is high and Bitcoin pulls back, then that's very bad news for altcoins. So that's where the pullback warning came from, right? And then when we're talking about Ethereum, which was still relatively strong, at this point in time, it's also struggling. I would argue, while it's trying to load some indicators, I would argue that Ethereum needs to hold this level around 2600 if we do not want to fall back down to 2550 initially, and then after that 2480, right? So that is also something I think you need to watch right here, and it's going to be very important to watch, because Ethereum is very often also a good measure of how strong altcoins are in general. Market is pulling back even more. I wish I would have made this video about 30 minutes earlier. XRP, as expected, also most likely pushing down. This morning in my XRP update, I did not talk about still dropping down into $2, which is what I said yesterday morning. I still do think that, right? And even though I did not explicitly say that in the video this morning, my thoughts regarding XRP on the higher time frames have not changed. And I still think it's most likely we will pull back down to the value area low at 2.07. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I do still think that's most likely. Now, talking about altcoins, there's not much that's worth to keep an eye on. I would say two things, or two coins are quite interesting, and those both have to do with stable coins specifically. And that's first of all Maker. Maker is holding on relatively well, especially also on the higher time frames. I think that's still going to rally up higher. And then second of all, I would also say Athena, which is also on the higher time frames, has been able to break out here or reclaim, and has its own stable coin. So yeah, that's what I think you need to know for now. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully it's at least informs you a little bit about what you need to know. But that is it for now. So thank you for watching. Take care and bye.